At the end of November, I completed a rough draft of my novel. I've written a few rough drafts at this point, and I always thought it would get easier as I wrote more, but I'm finding that there's always a new challenge to make the next story just as difficult to write as the last. I usually underwrite my stories because I'm so focused on the next scene, all of the fun things that are to come for the character and the character arc, that I almost want to enjoy my story the way a reader would, in that fast-paced action, which tends to make me underwrite because I want to get through a scene so fast that the internal dialogue, internal thoughts get cut, the descriptions are slimmed down, and it's mostly just strong dialogue and enough character actions to get a sense of what's going on, almost like a screenplay. But with this draft, it just kept going. I didn't hit the midpoint of my story until almost 40,000 words, and I finally hit the story around 75,000 words. This was in part because I really took my time with the first act of this story, seeing if I could slow down and really visualize the scenes as they came. By the time I got to the end, I was desperate to finish it. I ended up writing 10,000 words in one day, which is the most amount of words I've ever written in a day. And I'm really impressed with myself for doing that, but it left me feeling pretty burnt out. And the last, I'd say, 5,000-6,000 words that I wrote were very difficult. And I went back to underwriting. And when I finally finished the story, I didn't want to look at it anymore. I just wanted to put it away and step back from it all. Writing a book is like a marathon. You feel good for certain sections, and for others, it can get really, really tough. And at least for me, the last couple miles were extremely painful. It's interesting though, because even a few days after finishing the first draft, I started to get this itch to revisit the story. I started to miss the characters and the world, and all I wanted to do was open up a new document and start writing draft 2. But I've held myself back. Not because I don't want to start writing draft 2, because I'm not ready yet. Even though that spark has started to come back, there are still so many things I need to figure out if I want to make draft 2 really solid and improve my story in meaningful ways. I'm hoping to use that excitement for revision to help me plan and use starting draft 2 almost like a carrot to get me through. With the nights growing longer and the days getting shorter, it can be really hard to find the time to be outside, especially because we've had some really cold temperatures. It's gotten down to like -20 and -30 the last handful of days, and it can be really hard to be outside when it just feels so inhospitable. And I find myself ending up just running between warmed up locations, like from my house to the car and then back into work. I forget just how beautiful the environment here really is, and it's not until I go outside and spend time skiing or walking that it really sinks in that I get to live in such a beautiful place. And it's also really inspiring because my novel is set in a mountaineering competition where they're in the snow, they're in the cold, and so it's very directly applicable. I don't know if there would have been a better place to write this story than somewhere cold and snowy. I haven't set any goals, and I don't intend to, for the revision process or even the researching that I have to do before reaching the revision, because even though I like to set myself timelines and goals for the first draft, because the first draft is the hardest for me, getting the story out, getting the motivation to keep going, even when it feels like the whole plot is just falling apart. The revision, I really like to take my time. I can spend weeks on the same chapter sometimes, But I find that getting that time to just really make sure that each chapter, each plot line, each description is fitting into the larger goal of the story is really what it needs. Allowing myself to start the researching process whenever I felt like it. A small part of me wondered if that would even come, because researching has always been tough for me. I feel like it's too close to homework that I immediately want to reject it and not want to do it. But especially having written the first draft, there's specific things to do with the characters, to do with the world, that I do need to do some more research, because even though in the first draft you can kind of get away with saying whatever about it, putting a note that you need to do research later, now is the time to actually do the research, and very pointed research, because I know exactly the types of things I need to look into. And it finally happened. I started to look up videos that are related to the topics I'm interested about, and this felt very low stakes because watching a video is so passive, and one video turned into another, and I ended up spending over an hour just clicking through videos, learning a bit more. And it was such an interesting process, because as I was learning more, I would have these ideas for things to add to my story. Not necessarily huge changes, but enough to just add a bit more concrete detail, but it would springboard other ideas of little moments that could happen and really emphasizing my character's arc. It's a little bit hard to describe without spoiling it, but I'm gonna keep my story under wraps a bit more for now, especially as I start to really flesh it out. And then the next step for me was to actually look up online, doing Google searches for specific first-hand accounts so that I could get more specific information. I have a notebook that I've been writing down all of these new ideas, but is quickly getting out of hand trying to record where I want to input this. So what I've actually done is I've opened my first draft document, and I'll go to the specific place that I want to add whatever moment, and I'll add in bold a note of what I want to have done. Basically, when I write my notebook, I would just write in bold in that position in the story. And that way, when I go to writing draft 2, because I write my second draft or my subsequent draft with the previous draft open beside it to refer back and forth, I'll be able to see the exact moment when that needs to change and be able to change it. I still have more aspects of this kind of research world building that I need to do. I've really only tackled one of 3 of the potentially big topics that I need to delve more into. But the next thing I want to do is get some books to read and really immerse myself and see what other people do with similar stories, so that way I can understand if I am fulfilling the promises I'm making to the reader with my premise, and kind of doing a double check to make sure that a reader who picks up my book, knowing it's gonna have specific subjects in it, that I am covering those subjects adequately and giving them what they picked up the book to read. But even amongst preparing for my second draft, I'm still trying to find ways to reward myself for having written the first one, because I feel like as soon as I'm done, I'm just so focused on doing more, getting to the next stage, that I don't take much time to appreciate what I've accomplished. And honestly, finishing that draft, finishing the 50K in November, it almost seems more expected than it does something that I should be congratulating myself about, which is something I want to change. So when I was at this distillery the other day getting a present for Christmas for one of my family members, I decided to get myself a bottle because I found one that was Earl Grey tea, and that's literally what I drank every single day while writing the first book, so it just felt right. And they gave me this honey tea cake recipe that I wanted to try out, which involves half and half honey and the vodka. And I even used this shaker that we've had for a while but never actually used before. So it's time to taste test. I put Quali down because I know that she's not really in the mood right now to be held. She's trying to get on the counter and try the drink for herself. But here it is. It's very milky. It's strong, but I can actually taste the Earl Grey. So that's actually really good. And there's another recipe they gave me as well. It's for an Earl Grey martini, but I don't have any simple syrup right now, so I can't make this quite yet, but this is very, very delicious. I feel congratulatory in myself for having finished my first draft. This was great. And the rewards don't end here, because literally in a day or two, I'm gonna get a new book in the mail, a Brandon Sanderson, he's like a high fantasy author. I'm gonna get a book from him. So it's the 5th book in his Stormlight Archive series. I've been rereading all of his books leading up to that in the last few months, and I'm currently on the 4th one. And I'm this far in, so I still have all of this to read before I can read the 5th one, but it's fine. I don't know that I'll be able to get this done before the next book arrives, but just the unboxing I'm sure is going to be really great. Whoa. Dang. Cool.